Given that March 8th this year is International Women's Day and the theme behind it is inspiring inclusion, we here at Lifecraft thought it would be awesome for our next podcast to sit down with three incredible females in the security industry. And so we did just that. We sat down and we talked to them about their journey, their story, what fuels them, their passions, and we took some time to debunk some myths about women in security. You're going to enjoy that when you listen to the podcast. I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with Bobby Varman, who is the CEO and founder of Princeton Identity. Then we also sat down with Margie Gerwin, who is the founder of Content Creation Partners, and such a force, 25 years in the industry, just a force. You're going to enjoy that. And also Cheryl Mass was with us. She is the CEO and founder of Guardian Zone. This is an incredible conversation, you guys. Sit back, enjoy, and you know what? Happy International Women's Day. Cheryl, first question for you. Can you share a memorable experience where your gender actually influenced your approach and perspective in handling a security issue?
Yes. Thank you, Beverly, and thanks for having me here today and allowing me to share my perspective as a woman in the security industry. As we talked about before, my background was I was a diplomat for 25 years, right? Lived in high threat and dangerous countries, lived in the Middle East, lived in Africa. And so one of the things that influenced me starting my company was one, my cousin was actually killed in an active shooter event at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. But one of the things as a woman, I started thinking about different ways. How do I, when you go to large public places, be it venues or facilities, how do you as a woman protect yourself? And so in creating my company and creating our product, I believe that using that coming from a woman's perspective had some influence in how we actually designed our product and designed our company. So that's kind of how I did it. I think by gender, as a woman, there's certain things that we fear that men don't fear, right? So I was talking to my husband and I said, when my daughter was walking across campus at NYU at midnight, I was freaking out. But I probably, if it was a boy, we probably wouldn't have worried because we're not worrying what can happen at midnight, a little more safer. So I think sometimes people don't realize that women perceive danger a lot differently out there than men. And so therefore, when we're looking at security protocols and different things, we're actually assessing it a little bit differently.
Correct. And problem solving, I'm assuming you'd also say that our approach to problem solving might be a little different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion in creating more effective security strategies and solutions, especially considering since International Women's Day this year on March 8th, the theme is inspiring inclusion?
Well, I think that the need for inclusivity goes all the way from the creation of technology to who is selling it, to who is making the purchase decisions. If you start at the very beginning of that chain, look at the problems that early versions of facial recognition technology had. That you had a bunch of white men working at companies testing their own faces, and surprise, surprise, they does a much better job differentiating white men than people of color or women. And obviously that has been rectified greatly over time, as new versions of technology have come out. But that's just an example of what happens when you don't have a diverse workforce working on solutions. And then you go to the other end of the spectrum where you have people deciding what technology should go into place. And you have men, for example, who aren't appreciating the levels of fear that women may be encountering in the work environment. The example Cheryl gave, another example that I give frequently is I interviewed a hospital for a case study, and the director of the hospital talked to me about how they would lose staff members when daylight savings time would end, because these women would hire on at the beginning of the summer and the sun would be setting late and they'd be going home when it was light out. And then all of a sudden they had to be going out to their cars in the dark, and it was not a safe area. and there was insufficient lighting and there wasn't someone to support them to their vehicle, and they would quit.
Yeah.
And those are the types of problems that if you had women looking at these issues proactively, you would be making a significant difference, a better environment for everybody. Everyone loses when half your workforce doesn't feel safe.
That's really interesting, actually. I never, obviously, as a woman, going around buildings, I am checking the lighting and accessibility, but I never thought of it in terms of the security practitioner when you're doing your assessment of your work site, like things that maybe you might not think of if you're a man. That's really interesting.
So I was going to dive into that. Sorry, just because
Yeah.
we're having a conversation, you're going to edit it anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm going to dive into it. And I agree. And I think, to your point, right? I think, and I'm going back to what Margie said, is it's not just from a perspective of implementation, but also creation of technology, right? And that's really important. Having, that diversity, people who are thinking of solutions from engineering perspective, from a perspective of how, from a creativity perspective, what does that mean in the case of what Margie said, which is facial recognition? If you have a very monotonous, workforce, your ideas and how you look at analytics and the type of data that you implement is going to be one-sided, right? So having that concept of, hey, from a perspective of, hey, we've seen in facial recognition or other biometrics where people with color tend to have less accuracy, and that's out in the public press as well, right? So again, creating a solution that can be more holistic and inclusive of other races is really important, right, from a security perspective. So we see that quite a bit in our domain, right? We are a technology provider, and having that perspective from various different races and gender becomes really important, and taking that in consideration when we're designing solution becomes extremely important for us as well.
If I can also add, I mean, women are 50% of the population. And if you're building technology that only benefits the 50%, and what's going on with the other 50%, especially if you're not asking them if what you're building or how you're approaching it solves that issue, right? So, and I think a lot of times we see that I had a conversation with a guy one time when we were talking about our solution, and I said, "Oh, this would our solution actually could work in a shopping mall." And he goes, "Well, I never go shopping."
Okay.
So I was like, all right. But I know a lot of women who go shopping, and guess what? A lot of kids go shopping. I mean, don't we drop our teenagers off at the shopping mall and with their little buddies and their friends, and they go out? So wouldn't you want to know that your children are safe, not just based on your own shopping experience?
You're absolutely right, Cheryl. And that comes down to customer understanding, right? Building your building solution. And if you don't have that customer understanding and you're just focused on, hey, I know from my perspective how I need to build. And, and if you actually have, like I said, a workforce that is who's building the solution is, very similar, then you don't have that creativity ideas or customer understanding, or understanding, the type of decision making you need to make in order to kind of create the solutions, right? And that becomes very relevant when it comes to designing this type of solution. So I 100% agree with both Margie and Cheryl. I mean, you guys have a great perspective on that.
Yes.
And it makes sense, with cognitive diversity. And I was talking with one of you about this around the table. People start to ask different questions. And I think that's exactly what you need when you're trying to come up with a solution for anything, whether it's threat detection or protection, in both cases. Bobby, I want to just go back to you. Would you mind sharing with us what made you get into this space in the first place?
The reason I got into this space is because, first of all, it comes down to passion, as you can tell, right? I am very passionate when it comes to technology, just in general. And I was kind of working on technology that was very focused on authentication and security, right? And my passion drove my getting into security applications. But I think also I want to go back to originally when you guys were talking about, when women being not taken in consideration. So also what made me get into security was driving perspective from a woman's from women's understanding, right? How security is perceived. You know, as you grow up as a little girl, your parents always say, "Oh, watch out where you're going," or "Don't do this," and it's always, you know, you're always on at the highest levels of a security threat. You're always thinking about what is this going to happen, and so I had passion about how do you create solutions that does really bring security for younger women. And you know, and at that point I didn't have any kids, but if I ever had a daughter, I want her to be safe. I want, you know, my nieces and nephews, my family to be safe. And how do I create that solution that is inclusive of women as well and brings the women's perspective? So, you know, and then secondly, because, you know, I'm always one of those people who's looking at, if you have a male domineering society, how do we break that glass ceiling and get women in that? Right. So that was another driving force for me to say, okay, I can do it. Well, other people can do it. Right. And just the passion and persistence is, you know, what is something that I really valued and have gotten in, and that drove my passion to be in the security world.
Awesome. Cheryl, I wasn't going to pose this question to you, but I am now. I'd love to get your driver because you have a very interesting background in work history. And so you've chosen to kind of play in the space for over 25 years. Um, Talk to us about that, being the founder and CEO over at Guardian Zone.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I started my company in 2016, and there were two events. It was the event I mentioned in reference to my relative dying in South Carolina, but it also there was an active shooter event that happened in Paris in 2015, and my husband is from the Netherlands, and so actually where the Bataclan Theater was and where that happened, we had been on vacation in that area 2 years before. So it's not like I was there doing when it was happening, but I'm one of those people like, we could have been there, you know,
Yes.
that could have happened to us. And so I started thinking about how do I, you know, it really touched me in a way. It's almost like, you know, hearing God's voice saying, you know, this is something important. And I looked at that and I said, okay, well, I work in an embassy and I know that we get our duck and cover drills. I know our families are trained. I know our children are taught how to use the radio. They're called Marine Guards. I mean, we are taught so much security as a family when we're representing our country overseas. And I realized, we're in a habit of wherever we go, we're looking for exits. And then you get back to the United States and everybody's like, we're safe. I'm going to this game, we're safe. I'm going to this concert festival, we're safe. I'm going to this shopping mall, we're safe. And I'm going, but as we see more and more of these active shooter events, I'm like, we're not safe, but we're still projecting this ideology and culture that we're safe wherever we go. And so my thing was, I wanted, great. I want to be a part of that. I want to create a technology that allows people to in some ways be empowered to talk to security during a crisis. If I'm in your shopping mall and I see something or I feel a certain way, who do I talk to? Who do I contact? How do I get in contact with on-site security, or do I need to just call 911 and call law enforcement? And so that's kind of how the process started from Guardian Zone. But as I said, part of it came from being overseas and living in countries. I was in the Middle East during the Iraqi war. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in places where it's not safe, where, we had colleagues when they back out in the morning to go to work, there might be a guy standing off to the side with a gun ready to rob them. You think in a different way. And I think as a woman, it's even more frightening because you're not going to be able to fight. You're not going to be able to do a lot of things. And so it's really being smart. And so I just think when I got into this industry, it was really to kind of like what Bobby said, bring my voice and a diverse voice, but not just diverse as a woman, but diverse from coming outside the industry from somewhere else where there were security concerns and bringing that in.
Awesome. I could see I could sit here for like an hour and talk to you guys. Margie, so we've heard from Bobby and Cheryl on their experience. But I know that you sit on committees and boards, one of them being Women in Security, of that particular committee. Why is that work important to you?
Well, I've been in the security industry for 25 years, so I've seen a huge evolution in what the face of the industry looks like. And the change I've witnessed in the last 5 years since the Women in Security Forum has been in existence has been just this upward trajectory that I can't even begin to describe. Going from feeling like you're a real minority at these trade shows and at events that you attend, and all of a sudden feeling like you're part of a community, it makes you happy to be part of the industry and want to stick around and want to bring more women in, because in reality it's a great industry. You look at so many sectors right now that are really suffering with jobs. Technology is eliminating jobs. My husband works in media. The layoffs are crazy. What's going on? If you work in media, there's just not a future for you, unfortunately. If you're in security, there's a tremendous future for you. But you have to find your place there, and you have to enjoy it and feel welcome and feel like there's opportunity that you're going to be rewarded for your effort. And being a part of the Women in Security Forum, and Cheryl's on the steering committee with me, we are trying to pave the way for this next generation of women so that they have the networking opportunities and the connections and the support they need so that they can achieve everything that their male counterparts can.
So talking about resources, I'm still with you, Margie.
Yeah.
If an executive for a company where they have their own in-house security team, they've got analysts and all kinds of good stuff, investigators, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
They came to you and they said, hey, you know what? I'm looking at my team. I want to build it out. But do you have any tips for me on how we can be more supportive of women in security? What would you say to this person?
I would say that you should encourage from within the organization the nurture, and it totally depends on how big the organization is. There are big organizations who have members in the WISF, and in those companies they have their own women in security groups, which are terrific. But then there's a lot of smaller companies that don't have those resources, and for those, I would say that management should look for ways to help develop their female talent, pay for them to attend events like the Lead Her conference, which is being held in Phoenix this summer, the second annual event that's being hosted, joint effort between SIA and ASIS. And it's a fabulous opportunity for women to come together in the industry and learn both professional development and personal development, how to be a more powerful presenter, how to interact with colleagues. Any number of soft and hard skills are addressed at the conference. Offer to help them go back to school to get training, to get certifications. I think that also allowing women to shadow and be mentored by other people in the workforce, even if it's a guy. I think that a lot of young men in the workplace naturally form these relationships with senior level executives because they golf together or they go out to the bar together, and they have this relationship where they are being mentored without even realize they're being mentored. Whereas for the young women in the workplace, maybe the men feel awkward inviting them out to lunch one-on-one because socially, was that appropriate? Yes, it's appropriate. If this is a professional relationship and you're looking to help someone develop their skills, whatever they may be, then men need to mentor women until there's enough women to also be mentoring women.
Right.
Those are some suggestions.
Cheryl and Bobby, I'm going to open it up to you because you've worked. Do you have an opinion on that as well?
Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to go, Cheryl? So yeah, and of course, right? I would say, a lot of times, and I can just kind of go back to my experience in the past, as when I was looking into security world and as a young woman, I think a lot of times, especially at a younger age, you tend to be hesitant expressing your opinions as well, right? what Margie said was really good in the sense of you do want to interact with even males to kind of, and not only that, not be afraid to express your opinions as well, right? You'll be surprised how many, especially nowadays, men who are out there in the security world want to get other opinions from younger generation because again, they bring a different perspective. And so from that aspect, and also be persistent. I think as a younger woman, you want to be persistent and not let failure deter you. So a lot of times happens with the younger generation, and especially younger women, what ends up happening is they get a failure and they're like, well, do I really want to express my opinion? Am I being judged for what I'm saying? And I always say, especially when I say to some of the younger women that I work with and I'm mentoring them, I always say, don't let the failure deter you. Constantly express your opinion. Find as many mentors, women, men, whoever you can. Go out there for mentorship. Shadow them as often as you can in different environments as well. Besides socially, also in the workforce environment. And stretch and get stretch goals. Right? Don't. I mean, again, from my perspective, I'm always assertive. I've always been assertive and I continue to be assertive, but stretch goals are so important with younger women too, right? I noticed, like, I'll give you an example. There were times when a younger man who went up to a management and said, this is what I want, right? And the CEO responded back and said, no, I don't think I'm going to give it to you. 2 days later, he went back and he said, look, I'm going to insist. I want this. And I'll tell you, I did a similar situation where I went to my CEO at one point and said, I deserve this. I deserve a seat at the table. And his response was, well, no, I don't think. And guess what? I went back and didn't ever go back to him again at that moment. And I always think about that moment and I say to myself, I wish I would have done it. And I learned from that experience, and going forward I did. And believe me, that's one of the reasons I am where I am, because I didn't let my shyness or my thinking as a woman bring me down, right? I continued being persistent and going after what I really wanted.
Cheryl, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I wanted to carry it a little bit from a different perspective on that question. As Margie had mentioned, I'm part of the WISF steering committee, but I'm also the co-chair with Tracy Larson on the Strengthen Her subcommittee. And our subcommittee is actually about helping women entrepreneurs in the industry. And so what I want to say is that a lot of our companies are very small. And so, when Margie was talking about, when you asked the question, how could they help? Well, there are companies that, want to partner with other companies to either bring technology in to enhance what they're doing. And there are smaller, women-owned businesses within the organization that might fit that. And but a lot of times they either don't know about us or they're not approaching us. And so I think that would be another way to help. And that's one of the things our subcommittee wants to do is, hey, we have these smaller women-owned businesses because, in the industry, we talked about it earlier that, I know John from when I worked at this company or that company, and we get together, and now he has his own company. And so we have this, I don't want to call it the old boys club, but the old boys club, basically. And so how do we get into the club if we never get invited? And so I think that's part of it. And it's not even it's just the world is changing and there's more and more women. I know of a woman who has a cybersecurity company, but when they're looking at, maybe partnering with somebody for cybersecurity, they may not be looking at her company. And my thing is, if you want to help women or bring more of a diverse perspective into the industry, partner up with women-owned businesses as well.
I love that. I love that. And then we're coming close to time. I want to ask you all a very quick speed round question, which is, are there myths about women insecurity that you'd like to debunk right now? Bobby, you.
Yeah, I think women are considered softer, right? So they're given softer roles, either low-level roles or administration roles, right? So yes, absolutely. I mean, we are not. We are tougher than ever, right? So I can definitely say I want to debunk that. women are as equal as men when it comes to that type of, getting those type of roles. We're not soft. We are hardened people, and we actually, we bring different perspective to the security world.
Cheryl, how about you? Anything you want to debunk?
Yeah, a little bit. Kind of what I was going to go on with what Bobby was saying about us being softer, but I was also going to say that's also a plus. It's not a negative to be softer, right? We're bringing a different perspective. It's almost like being parents, right? If my father is a disciplinarian, I don't need my mother to be that hard of a disciplinarian as well. I need that softer side to make me a well-rounded child, right? So I think within this industry, you also need women who come in and being soft does not mean weak. And I think that's what we have to also understand. Just because I'm softer or I think differently doesn't mean I'm weak. What it means is I just come with a different perspective, and I bring that.
Okay. I would say that there may be a assumption that women don't perform as well under pressure, that we're emotional, or that we get stressed out more easily, that we're more reactive. And I think in many cases it's the opposite, that we are very methodical and we're planners. That's just the nature of being female. We're thinking many steps ahead. And as security becomes more about brain rather than brawn, then you want people who are thinking ahead and planning, and that's a real forte of our half of society.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you guys so
Yeah.
much. I know we're at time, but I think we have a lot of stuff with some very good clips, especially you dropping your earbuds in the water.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's gonna be the first clip you're gonna get out there.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh my gosh.
Comic relief there. Comic relief.